My name is Jared Wexler, and every sunrise for the past 20 years has found me elbow-deep in concrete, steel beams, or the stubborn soil of Barrow Falls, Wisconsin. I started my construction firm with nothing but a beat-up pickup, a toolbox full of hopes, and a fierce belief that my own two hands could build something real. No loans, no investors, no safety net, just 20-hour days, rusted tools that had outlasted my old pickup, and a stubborn streak I inherited from my father. He used to say a man's worth was measured by the sweat on his brow and the strength of his handshake. I carried both into every project, from the crumbling church foundation on Fifth Street to the gleaming municipal library that still stands at the town center. 11 years ago, I married Alyssa, bright-eyed and fierce in her own way, at the edge of a field where I'd laid the groundwork for my first real contract. She was teaching third grade at Meadowbrook Elementary, and somewhere between lesson plans and parent-teacher conferences, we built a life. Our son Micah came 9 years ago, and with his first cry, I discovered a love sharper than any steel girder and more delicate than the finest porcelain. Everything I built after that was for him. The backyard sandbox, the treehouse overlooking the pond, the sturdy barstools in our kitchen where he would eat cereal and tell me about his adventures. So when Alyssa came to me the afternoon her brother Shane Donovan lost his job in Chicago, I recognized that pleading look, that whispered urgency she had perfected over years of family loyalty. "Jared," she said, voice low so Micah wouldn't overhear, "he's struggling. He needs a fresh start." I closed the ledger I was balancing at my desk and looked at her over the rim of my glasses. Shane, entitled, flashy, arrogant. The kind of man who drove a black Escalade to show he belonged somewhere he never earned admission. I had seen him at family gatherings, spending money on drinks, compliments, and hollow jokes that echoed his own need for attention. But this was Alyssa's brother. The same blood that ran through her calm veins also ran through his restless heart. I hesitated. My mind raced through worst-case scenarios. A man who thought no task beneath him was worth his time, a man who'd never lifted a shovel unless someone else paid him to, or a man who might see my company not as a lifeline, but as a playground for his ambitions. Yet when I looked into Alyssa's eyes, full of hope, worry, and trust, I caved. I told myself mercy was a virtue. I reminded myself we were family. And so I offered Shane a position at Wexler and Sons Construction, a cushy title, real pay, and a promise that he'd earn respect by doing exactly what was expected. The morning he arrived, I handed him a crisp company polo and a laminated badge with his name under the title Assistant Project Coordinator. He nodded, flashed that practiced, confident grin, and said, "Thanks, Jared. You won't regret this." I clapped him on the shoulder and felt the faint tremor of doubt ripple through me. But this was faith. This was giving a man a chance. Weeks passed, and I leaned back in my leather chair one afternoon, watching Shane stroll past my office with the ease of a man who owned every step he took. He chatted with site supervisors, swapping jokes and cigars. He hovered over project managers, offering unsolicited advice on material costs and contractor schedules. I told myself it was just the ego of a new hire finding his footing. But my gut tightened every time I passed his cubicle, where I could see spreadsheets rearranged, email threads forwarded without explanation, and contracts annotated in his looping handwriting. One Thursday morning, Monica Reyes, the executive coordinator who had been with me since I scribbled my first business plan on bar napkins, slipped into my office with her expression so grave I thought she might be ill. "Jared," she whispered, leaning close, "Shane asked me to reroute a vendor payment under your name, $24, $500 to Midwest Steelworks, but I kept copies." Her quiet voice trembled with loyalty and fear. I closed my eyes and felt the air leave my lungs. "He's building a case," Monica said, voice low enough that the walls of the office might not hear. "He's setting you up for embezzlement." That night, I sat alone at my kitchen table, Micah's half-painted model airplane abandoned nearby, and Alyssa's almost empty wine glass sitting cold at her place. I replayed every interaction, every spreadsheet, every friendly pat of approval Shane had handed out like candy. My heart pounded a warning rhythm. I had handed him a loaded weapon. Mercy had become my greatest vulnerability. I stared out the window at the dim glow of streetlights reflecting off the snow-frosted driveway. Somewhere between mercy and paranoia, I realized I had signed my own warrant. I trusted family. I believed in second chances. But I had never doubted that a man's ambition could twist generosity into betrayal. I reached for my phone and dialed Monica. Her voice answered within 2 rings. "I've archived every request Shane's made. every rerouted invoice, and every email he forged. We'll be ready. I leaned back in my chair and let the weight of my mistakes settle over me like the Wisconsin winter. Mercy had led me here, to the brink of losing everything I built. My company, my reputation, my family. I closed my eyes and whispered to the empty room. I called it mercy. I opened them again, and in that moment, I knew what came next. Turns out, I was handing him a loaded weapon. From the moment Shane Donovan swaggered onto my job site wearing a freshly pressed company polo, I sensed a shift in the air, like the calm before a storm. He moved through the crews with the ease of a celebrity walking a red carpet, nodding and smiling, as if every pair of mud-splattered boots should bow at his arrival. I watched him from the edge of the foundation pit, where my foreman, Dave, and I were reviewing rebar placements. Dave stuck his chin out toward Shane. "He's making himself at home," Dave muttered, wiping grease from his palm. I forced a laugh and shrugged, but inside, a knot tightened. Shane wasn't content to learn the ropes or ask the right questions. Instead, he rewrote the project timeline, cutting deadlines in half and demanding crews double-shift weekends. He'd stroll into the office trailer, grin at Monica as though they shared a secret joke, and flip through her meticulously organized binders. At first, I told myself he was ambitious, eager to prove himself. But when I found my project manager's meeting notes scattered across the break table, annotated in his handwriting with suggestions that contradicted my own specifications, I realized I'd given him a dangerous toy. In the days that followed, Shane systematically pushed out the people who questioned him. He praised Marcus, one of my site supervisors, in front of the whole crew, giving him marginally higher pay and half-hearted glory. Marcus beamed like a man who'd been handed a lottery ticket. Meanwhile, Lily, my assistant project manager, arrived one morning to find Shane had reassigned half her subcontractor calls to his own spreadsheet, removing her name entirely. She stared at the altered document in disbelief, her eyes reddening. "He can't just," she began, but he was already walking away, talking on his phone as though she'd never existed. I tried to confront him once, cornering him beside the dumpsters behind the trailer. I told him to stop undermining my team, to respect the chain of command. He turned slowly, a mocking eyebrow arched above his dark eyes. "Jared," he said, voice flat and icy, "I'm here to optimize this company. I'm not your lackey." He paused, as if measuring the sting that would follow. "You hired me to help, remember?" Then he walked off, leaving me staring after him, frustration and regret swirling in my gut like a bad meal. Word spread fast through the ranks. Clients called with nervous questions. Why had the monthly progress report changed format? Why were payment deadlines moved up? Even municipal inspectors noticed revised blueprints stamped with my name but drafted in Shane's sleek font. I sensed clients dialing my number and then hesitating before dialing Shane's. Each time I picked up the phone, I felt the tremor in my voice, telling me I was losing command of the company I built. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the pine trees lining Lake Willow, I stayed late to sort through the day's emails. My inbox felt like a minefield, vendor invoices forwarded without explanation, purchase orders approved without my signature. Monica slipped into the office, her face pale beneath the fluorescent lights. She closed the door quietly and handed me a thick stack of printouts. "These are all the contract revisions Shane made this week," she said. "He's altering scope of work, inflating material costs, and rerouting funds to phantom subcontractors." My pulse raced as I flipped through the pages. Each change bore his initials, each figure bloated by percentages that made my blood boil. I looked up at Monica. "We need to stop him," I said, voice rough. "He's not here to help. He's here to take over." She nodded, eyes fierce. "I've been saving everything in a separate folder, but I don't know how far he's gone." That night, I couldn't sleep. I replayed every conversation I'd had with Shane, every friendly pat on my back I'd mistaken for genuine support. I recalled Alyssa's pleading eyes, her belief that this would help her brother stand on his feet. I recalled promising her mercy, convinced I was doing the right thing. Now, derailed schedules and lawsuits from confused vendors were piling up like snowdrifts, threatening to bury everything I'd worked to build. By the next morning, I steeled myself. I gathered the core team, Dave, Lily, Monica, and we huddled in the conference room. I laid out the printouts Shane had left behind, altered contracts, forged signatures, unexplained line items that redirected payments to empty P.O. boxes. Their faces mirrored mine: shock, betrayal, anger. Lily slammed her fist on the table. "He's stabbing us in the back." Dave leaned in. "We need to document everything." Every call, every email, every instance of sabotage. Over the next week, Monica and I unwound his tangled web. She compared purchase orders to bank statements, uncovered shell companies registered under alternate addresses, and traced unauthorized expenses back to Shane's personal account. Every night, I sat at my kitchen table, reviewing spreadsheets with a red pen, circling discrepancies. Alyssa hovered at the edge of the doorway, worry etched across her features. I tried to explain, but the weight of shame kept my throat tight. When Shane realized I'd discovered his schemes, he struck faster. He called an all-hands meeting, standing at the head of the table with polished confidence, declaring that I was resistant to change and unfit to lead in a modern market. He passed around a memo suggesting the board should evaluate my performance and consider fresh leadership. His words were sugar-coated poison. Many of my supervisors sat in stunned silence, glancing at me and then at Shane, uncertainty flooding their eyes. I felt a cold sweat as I rose to speak. I laid out the evidence. Emails, invoices, digital logs, my voice steady despite the tremor I felt inside. I reminded everyone of the work we'd done together, the buildings we'd raised from nothing, the community we'd served. I spoke of loyalty, sweat, and the promise I'd made to those who trusted me. Shane's smug smile faltered as I revealed each forged document, each diverted payment. By the end of the meeting, the tide had turned. My team rallied, offering support and apologies for doubting me. But I knew this battle was far from over. Shane's poison had seeped into every corner of my company. Undoing it would take everything I had left, and then some. As the crowd dispersed, Monica slipped me a note. I've saved backups of everything on a secure drive. We're ready for whatever comes next. I closed the meeting room door and leaned against it, breathing hard. I pictured Micah's face, trusting and bright. I pictured the first beams I had lifted with my father's hands guiding mine. Mercy had brought Shane to my doorstep, but now I saw that loyalty to family did not require sacrificing the trust of those who built their lives alongside me. I squared my shoulders and left the room, determined to reclaim what was mine, protect the people who believed in me, and root out the snake in a company polo before it sank its fangs any deeper. I woke that Monday morning before dawn, the sky still a bruise of purple and gray as I slipped on a fresh button-down and the only suit I had left in the closet. The rental by the lake had no dress code, but I forced myself to look sharp, just in case. My leather shoes squeaked against the hardwood floor as I made my way down the narrow hallway past the bedroom, where Micah slept soundly in his Star Wars sheets. I paused at the door, listening to the soft rise and fall of his breathing. He didn't know yet that his world would shift today. I closed my eyes and whispered, "I'll fix this, buddy," then turned toward the door and the unknown that awaited me. By the time I pulled into the company parking lot, the sky had lightened to a pale blue. I parked next to a black sedan I didn't recognize and paused before I reached for the door handle. The air smelled of fresh asphalt and faint pine from the surrounding trees, since I had once associated with possibility, not betrayal. I squared my shoulders, let out a slow breath, and stepped out. My heart ticked in my chest like a metronome set to allegro. As I approached the front entrance, two men in dark suits stood waiting by the glass doors. I didn't recognize their faces, but I recognized the authority in their posture. Shoulders squared, feet planted, eyes scanning. My chest tightened. One of them stepped forward. "Mr. Wexler?" His tone was polite, but his words landed like stones. "We need to speak with you inside." I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. "Of course," I replied, forcing calm into my voice. Inside, the lobby felt colder than usual. The polished marble floor reflected the harsh overhead lights, creating false glimmers of hope that vanished under my feet. The receptionist barely looked up as I passed. I followed the two men down the hallway to the boardroom, each step echoing in my ears louder than the last. The door was closed. I could hear low voices inside, my voice, I hoped, and the unmistakable cadence of someone gloating. One of the security officers rapped sharply on the door. "Mr. Wexler, boardroom." The handle turned, and I stepped in. The room was bright with morning sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows, but I felt like I'd walked into a spotlight. Around the long mahogany table were stacked binders, their spines labeled with phrases like project audit, financial irregularities, and personnel records. At the head sat Shane, looking more polished than I'd ever seen him. Crisp shirt, tailored jacket, tie knotted just so. His smug smirk welcomed me. "Good morning, Jared," he said, voice smooth as silk. Please, have a seat. I forced a nod and lowered myself into a chair at the opposite end. My palms itched with the impulse to shove the binders off the table and ask who had given him the right. Instead, I cleared my throat. What is all this? My voice echoed in the hushed room. Shane leaned back, one hand draped casually over a stack of papers. I'll let Monica explain, he said, eyes glinting. That triggered a flash of relief. Monica would be here. She was the only person I could trust in this room, and now, I realized, the only person standing between me and complete ruin. Instead, it was not Monica who rose, but two suited attorneys I'd never met. One clicked open a briefcase and withdrew a tablet. The other tapped its screen. Mr. Wexler, he said, voice void of warmth. We have reason to believe that you have misappropriated funds from several municipal contracts and engaged in unauthorized financial transactions under the company's name. My breath caught. The words hung in the air, misappropriated, unauthorized, engaged. I shot a glance at Monica, but her eyes were downcast, lips pressed tight. It took every ounce of composure to keep my face from crumbling. That's impossible, I said, voice strained. I've lived and breathed this company for 20 years. Why would I corrupt what? Shane interrupted, standing and unfolding a projector screen. As the sheet descended, he pressed a button, and behind him I saw the first slide, a logo of my firm stamped with a red evidence stamp. One by one, charts and graphs populated the white backdrop, showing vendor payments diverted, forged signatures, and bank transfers routed through shell accounts. Each line in the spreadsheet was labeled, approved by JW. My initials. My name. My guilt, if anyone chose to believe the story. The security officers stepped forward, their mirrored badges catching the morning light. Mr. Wexler, one said, we need to secure your laptop and accompany you off company property. I felt my stomach drop. The floor disappeared beneath me. My laptop, my life's work, my emails, my personal files was being seized as if it were contraband. I stood up, heart pounding. Wait, I said, voice cracking. You can't just confiscate my computer. There must be a mistake. My plea bounced off the cold walls. One officer extended a gloved hand toward the table. On it sat my laptop, open to the login screen I had used every day for years. The other officer closed in, gently but firmly taking the device. I watched it slide away like a lifeline being cut. I opened my mouth again, but no words came. Shane clapped once, as though to celebrate a job well done. Thank you, gentlemen. Then he looked back at me, his smirk flickering with triumph. I'm cleaning house, Jared. And you, my friend, have been exposed. I felt tears sting my eyes, tears of anger, shame, disbelief. My cheeks burned as the board members and department heads who had once looked up to me now stared in stunned silence. A few whispering conversations began, voices hushed. I heard the staccato click of phone cameras capturing the moment. I, the man who built this company brick by brick, was being walked out like a criminal. The security officers guided me to the door. Every step felt like a betrayal, by Shane, by the system, by my own mercy for a man who never deserved it. Before I reached the elevator, I turned one last time toward the boardroom. Monica's desk was empty, her chair pushed in neatly as if she had never existed. The only thing standing between me and oblivion had slipped away, leaving only the piles of paper that bore witness to Shane's deception. I stepped into the elevator, doors sliding shut on the face I once wore with pride. As the car descended, I felt the world shrink around me. The mirrors reflected a man broken, but far from defeated. I pressed my forehead against the cool glass and closed my eyes. Monica's words from weeks ago echoed, "We'll be ready." The doors opened, and I walked out into the lobby, past the reception desk that barely registered my presence. Outside, the morning sun felt harsh against my skin. I swallowed hard and forced my legs to carry me to my car. I didn't look back. I didn't have to. The echo of the boardroom, the binders, Shane's smirk, they would haunt me until the day I reclaimed my name. As I slipped into the driver's seat, I fingered the bracelet Micah had given me on Father's Day, the one engraved with our initials. I whispered into the empty cab, "I'll make this right." Then I started the engine. I left behind the life I had built and set my course toward the fight that would either destroy me or define me once more. A week after I'd been marched out of my own office, I found myself sitting across from Alyssa in a cramped law office conference room, the fluorescent lights humming overhead and a stack of dusty legal pads between us. The room felt sterile, like every whisper could become evidence against me. I inhaled slowly, letting the antiseptic scent settle in my lungs as I laid the manila folder on the table. Inside were dozens of documents, email logs, voice memos, scanned invoices, and Monica's neatly tabulated audit spreadsheets. I watched Alyssa's face with a mixture of desperation and relief. She looked away first, the hard line of her jaw rejecting me before she stopped herself. "I still don't understand," she said, voice breaking. "How could he? I mean, he was my brother." She pressed her palms into her knees, knuckles white. I reached across the table and placed a single sheet of paper in front of her, an internal audit report, headlined in red ink, that Monica had unearthed buried beneath Shane's digital bureau. It detailed missing equipment orders, padded vendor invoices, and $180,000 unaccounted for. Alyssa's eyes widened. She touched the paper, tracing the numbers as though they were hieroglyphs she'd never learned to read. This is real," she whispered. I nodded, swallowing down a surge of anger that threatened to spill into my voice. "Not only real," I said gently, "but criminal." I saw her exhale, relief mingled with guilt in the crease between her brows. I leaned forward, voice low so only she could hear. "He didn't just want to help himself. He wanted to destroy me." I tapped another document, a voice memo Monica captured, in Shane's own words, telling a cohort of shell company associates to bury the paperwork under Jared's name, make it look like he's cooking the books. Alyssa's hand flew to her mouth. "He recorded it?" she asked, stunned. "He did." I paused, thinking of Monica, the friend I had taken for granted, whose loyalty outshone a blood bond. But it's more complicated. I slid another stack across the table, text from Erica Finn, the junior accountant Shane had seduced into complicity. The messages were intimate, co-conspiratorial, laced with Tina Louise, the pseudonym Erica used, sending late-night analysis of forged contracts and Shane's approving good work, babe. Alyssa's lips trembled as she read. "He used her," she said finally, tears gathering in her eyes. And I thought, she shook her head, voice barely audible. I thought maybe he was turning over a new leaf. I wanted to pull her into my arms, but I kept my distance. Everything here was about proof, not emotion. He wasn't. He was building an empire on lies and stolen opportunities. Alyssa's tears fell silently. "I should have listened to you." She closed her eyes, voice thick. "I'm sorry." I swallowed. Her apology was enough. I didn't need recrimination. I needed partnership. "This isn't about blame," I said. "It's about what we do next." I flipped to the final sheet, the affidavit Monica drafted to file with the FBI and the Wisconsin Fraud Bureau. It recounted identity theft. Shane had signed approvals in the name of a retired consultant who died in 2018, wire fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy to defraud. My blood pounded in my ears. Alyssa exhaled, her shoulders straightening. "Then let's do it." She reached for the affidavit. "Let's bring him down." I nodded, meeting her gaze. In that moment, I saw the woman I married, resilient, determined, someone who could bear the weight of a family scandal and choose justice over denial. We signed. The lawyer instructed us on next steps: deliver the documents to the board, alert federal agents, and prepare a civil claim to recover damages. Every signature we pinned felt like a hammer strike, driving nails into the coffin of Shane's treachery. When we finished, Alyssa folded her hands on the table and breathed deeply. "It hurts," she said, voice small. "But I know it's right." I reached across and took her hand. The calloused edges of my palm brushed against hers, proof of the life we built together, the life Shane tried to bulldoze. "For Micah," I said softly, thinking of our son's trusting face. "He deserves to grow up knowing truth and integrity, not lies and betrayal." Alyssa's eyes glistened, and she squeezed my hand once, twice, before releasing it. We left the law office as a team rather than fractured siblings. The afternoon sun felt warmer on my cheeks as we stepped outside, evidence folders under our arms like shields. Every passerby was a reminder of the community we served, the families who counted on my firm to build their homes and schools. Each brick we laid had once been poured with my blood, sweat, and dreams. Now those bricks would stand against Shane's attempt to raise everything. In the car, Alyssa turned toward me. "Thank you for not giving up," she said. Her voice was steady but soft. "Thank you for fighting." I glanced at her, feeling a surge of gratitude for her willingness to see the truth. "I'd do anything for this family," I replied, "even if it means fighting my own blood." She nodded, eyes shining. "Then let's finish this." As we drove toward home, toward the fight that would test every ounce of our resolve, I realized mercy had its place. but so did justice. And sometimes, to protect what you love most, you had to show no mercy to the snake in your midst. The first time I set foot in that cramped lakeside rental, I felt hollow, like a puppet whose strings had been severed. The furniture was sparse, a sagging couch, a rickety kitchen table, and a single flickering lamp that cast more shadows than light. I slept in sweats and an old t-shirt, curled on the couch because the bedroom felt too lonely. Mornings began in bitter silence. I'd sit at the table with a cup of instant coffee, watching the waves lap the shore, trying to convince myself that I still existed outside the courtroom of Shane's lies. Monica refused to relent. She showed up one dawn before my eyes were even open, breathing urgency into the stale air. "I found something," she said, cheeks flushed from the cold. She spread a stack of printed bank statements across the table, forged equipment orders for earth-moving machinery that never arrived, checks sent to shell vendors in Iowa, and transfers wired straight into Erica Finn's consulting account. "He siphoned off another $50,000 since our last audit," she whispered, voice taut with anger. I slid the papers toward me, feeling each fraudulent line as a fresh wound. "Why are we still playing catch-up?" I asked, though I knew the answer. Shane had buried his tracks deeper than any ordinary fraudster. He'd mastered the art of redirection, of burying evidence in digital haystacks. Monica's eyes hardened. "Because every time we think we've cornered him, he pops up somewhere else." She paused, voice softening. "But I have a plan." Over the next days, we worked in relentless tandem. Each morning, Monica hauled her laptop into the tiny rental and booted up a digital fortress of encrypted files. I sat beside her, armed with printouts from my lawyer and notes from Paul Harrison's renewed support. We cross-referenced vendor invoices with delivery receipts, interviewed site supervisors off the record, and subpoenaed Shane's personal email account. Every hour uncovered a new betrayal, false change orders that inflated labor costs, consulting fees paid to Erica's ghost company, even unauthorized condominium payments that directly matched Shane's own address. One afternoon, my phone buzzed with a text from Erica. "We need to talk. I'm scared." My heart slammed against my ribs. I dialed her number immediately. Her voice trembled when she picked up. "Monica's been calling me, threatening me with charges. I never meant to hurt anyone." I held the phone away, listening to the static of her confession as she admitted to shredding original invoices and backdating approvals. "He said I'd be taken care of," she whispered. I thought it would be just paperwork." I let her talk herself into a deeper hole, every denial and apology weaving a trap she didn't yet see. "Erica," I said finally, voice measured, "if you're willing to be truthful, we can help you." She hesitated, then spilled everything: late-night meetings with Shane, secret deposits made to her account, and a promise Shane had made to split whatever comes. As she spoke, a knot in my gut unraveled, replaced by righteous fury. That evening, I met Monica at the rental single gas stove, where we heated cans of soup and ate in near darkness. I laid out Erica's admissions and shook my head. "He used loyalty like a weapon," I said, voice low. "He built a scheme on people he could manipulate." Monica nodded, eyes glinting with determination. "Good. Because now we have two more threads to pull: Erica's statements and the audit trails for those phantom condos." We spent the night drafting Erica's affidavit and bolstering it with corroborating documents: apartment leases showing her name at Shane's old address, notarized contractor logs showing no equipment deliveries, and time-stamped emails that placed Erica in conference calls she'd denied. As dawn broke, I stepped outside to watch the lake catch the first rays of sun. I felt something I hadn't in weeks: purpose. The next morning, Erica arrived in person, nervous but resolute. She handed Monica a manila envelope stuffed with bank statements, text message transcripts, and her own sworn statement, the ink still wet. I watched her leave with a newfound respect. I'd underestimated her courage under threat. As she stepped into her car, she looked back and mouthed, "Good luck." With Erica's documents in hand, we had a comprehensive narrative to present: a network of fraud that spanned company accounts, personal pockets, and a dead consultant's identity. I called my lawyer and scheduled a meeting with the board. I contacted Paul Harrison to confirm our next steps, and I drafted a press release with my public relations counselor to reclaim my name in the community. That night, back at the rental, I sat at the kitchen table alone, the moonlight painting silver lines on the water outside. I stared at my reflection in the window, tired eyes set into a face that had fought back from darker places. I thought of Micah and how he'd innocently asked whether his dad had stolen money. I thought of every tender moment I'd shared with him, teaching him to build tree houses and to never give up when life crumbles around you. I allowed myself a moment of quiet gratitude for Monica, for Erica, and for the truth that refused to stay buried. As the rental's single lamp flickered off into darkness, I whispered into the still night, "They won't break us." And I knew, with fierce certainty, that the next sunrise would find me ready to reclaim the company, my reputation, and the future I'd built for my family. The day Monica called with her discovery, I was standing in the middle of a half-finished community center lobby, surveying the scattering of concrete blocks and steel studs that would one day be the town's gathering place. My foreman had gone for supplies, leaving me alone with the blueprints in the echo of my own thoughts. My phone buzzed in my pocket with an urgency I hadn't felt since Monica first warned me about Shane. I wiped my hands on my jeans, peered at the screen, and saw her text, "Hidden shares, legal oversight. Call now." I swallowed hard and ducked into the makeshift office trailer, where layers of dust and fluorescent light made reality feel delayed. Monica looked up from her laptop, which was open to a scanned copy of the company's original incorporation documents. Her eyes were bright with triumph. "Jared," she said, voice low, "he never filed to remove your ownership." I stared at the screen, my heart pounding as I read the lines. Jared H. Wexler, 49% common shares, non-transferable without express written consent. Shane had assumed that once he seized control of operations, he had also erased my stake. But he was wrong. I still legally owned almost half the company. I closed my eyes and let that sink in, the power to force his hand, to demand accountability, to reclaim what was mine. I leaned forward. "So with proof of his fraud, I can force a shareholders' meeting and call for a vote to remove him." Monica nodded, tapping a key. "Exactly. And we've got the evidence, fraudulent invoices, shell company payments, identity theft. The board can't refuse a vote." I exhaled, relief and adrenaline sparking like live wires through my veins. "First thing tomorrow, we file the notice," I said. "And inform Paul Harrison, he's still our biggest client." That afternoon, I met Paul in the back room of a quiet diner where we'd sealed our first major contract over coffee and maple bars. He slid into the booth across from me, concern knitting his brow when he saw the dark circles under my eyes. "How are you holding up?" he asked, stirring cream into his coffee. I sighed. "I've been better," I said. "But I have news. Shane's overstepped. He's stolen more than just money. He's tried to steal my company from me." I laid out Monica's findings. The unfiled share transfer, the board's unwitting complicity, and the documentation we drafted for a formal shareholders vote. Paul leaned back, processing the weight of it. Then he nodded, slowly, decisively. "My board wants stability, not chaos," he said. "If you can present a new proposal, one I trust is coming from you, they'll switch back." He slid me a folder labeled Belridge School Board Proposal. "Write it up, partner. We're with you." I clasped his hand across the table, gratitude tightening my throat. After years of loyalty, he'd given me a second chance. With his support, I knew the tide could turn. On the drive back, I called Monica and gave her the green light to file the shareholder notice with the Secretary of State. "Make it official," I said, "and prepare the resolution to remove Shane as an officer." She promised a copy of the filing minutes, and I felt the first real glimmer of hope since this nightmare began. That evening, I returned to the rental and found Alyssa sitting at the kitchen table, staring at her phone. She looked up when I walked in, and I could see the worry still etched in her features. "How did it go?" she asked. I set my briefcase down and sat across from her, pulling out the filed notice and the shareholders' resolution. "We're forcing a vote," I said. "He still holds 49% on paper, but with our evidence and our allies, the board will have to act." Alyssa's relief was palpable. She exhaled and reached for my hand. "I knew you'd find a way," she said softly. As we dinnered on takeout lake perch and steamed vegetables, I walked her through the plan: notify the board, call an emergency meeting, present Erica's and Monica's affidavits, and secure Paul Harrison's renewed contract under my name. By the time we cleared the plates, our partnership felt renewed, with purpose and a shared resolve to protect the company their lives depended on. The next morning dawned crisp and clear. I arrived at the downtown office building clutching the printed shareholders' notice. The receptionist watched me with polite curiosity as I signed in. I stepped into the elevator and felt the weight of every step, each floor counting down to confrontation, to reckoning, to the moment I would stand up and take back what was mine. In the boardroom, Monica and I set our documents on the table alongside the binders of financial evidence. The board members, some sympathetic, some wary, took their seats. Shane arrived last, smug as ever, until he saw the stack of legal paperwork waiting for him. His smirk faltered as I cleared my throat. "Thank you all for gathering on such short notice," I began. "I've called this meeting under my rights as a 49% shareholder to address serious breaches of fiduciary duty." As the hearing unfolded, Monica presented the audit. I introduced the legal oversight. Paul Harrison testified by phone, endorsing my leadership. Shane tried to object, launching into rehearsed denials, but each was met with documented proof. Invoices, voice memos, Erica's affidavit, and the unbroken legal chain showing my shareholding. His defenses crumbled one by one until he slumped into his seat, defeated. When the vote was called, the board unanimously removed Shane as an officer and reaffirmed my position as CEO. A murmur of relief swept through the room, my team reclaiming faith in the company we built together. I exhaled, feeling the tension drain from my shoulders. Monica offered me a triumphant smile, and I nodded, gratitude swelling in my chest. That afternoon, I called Alyssa and Micah. Micah's voice crackled with excitement when he heard the news. "Dad, you're back," he said, giddy. I laughed, tears pooling. "I'm back, buddy. And I'm here to stay." I hung up and gazed out at the Wisconsin sky through the boardroom windows. The fight had been brutal, but the victory was sweeter for every edge it had taken to achieve. I had reclaimed not only a company but the trust of my employees, the respect of my clients, and the loyalty of my family. Shane had forgotten the most important rule. You can fake papers, you can forge signatures, but you can't fake dedication, loyalty, or the unbreakable bond between a man and the life he built with his own hands. I froze when my phone buzzed on the passenger seat, Micah's name lighting up the screen like a beacon in the darkness of my uncertainties. I just finished reviewing the final draft of our new proposal to Belridge School Board, every outline and cost estimate painstakingly recalculated under my watch, when his voice crackled through the speaker. "Dad, is it true?" His tone trembled with confusion and fear. "Did you steal money?" My heart lurched, landing somewhere beneath my ribs with a hollow thud. I gripped the steering wheel, knuckles whitening, and swallowed past the lump in my throat. "Who told you that, buddy?" I asked, trying to steady my voice against the tremor I felt inside. He hesitated, breath shallow. "Uncle Shane. He said you messed up the payments and that now you're in big trouble." His words echoed the rumors I'd fought so hard to bury, the lies Shane whispered into vulnerable ears like poison. I closed my eyes, picturing his 9-year-old face, bright, trusting, innocent, drawn into a drama he should never have known. "I'm not in trouble, Micah," I said gently. "Your uncle made some mistakes, and we're fixing them. Remember when you spilled juice on my laptop last week and I called it an accident? Well, grown-ups can make big mistakes too, but that doesn't mean they're bad people." "Are you a bad guy?" he whispered, voice cracking. I inhaled, fighting back a tide of guilt for dragging my son into this chaos. "No," I said firmly. "I'm your dad. I build things so people can live and learn and laugh in them. Sometimes people lie about me when they're angry or jealous. But I promise you, I'm not a bad guy." There was silence, the kind that trembles with possibility. Then, in a voice small but steady, Micah said, "I don't know what to believe." The admission tore at me. "That's okay," I replied. "Just know that I love you, and I'm working to make things right. I'll show you the truth when I get home." Okay, he whispered. "Be careful." The line went dead, and I sat with the echo of his words, the dashboard lights painting my face in bruised colors. I closed my eyes and exhaled, bracing myself for what came next. Later that afternoon, Monica called with news that felt like an anchor dropping into a document showing $180,000 missing from municipal contracts. Worse, he'd stolen the identity of Harold Simmons, a retired consultant who passed away 7 years ago, to authorize phantom change orders. Identity theft. Wire fraud. The kind of criminal charge that echoes in courtrooms long after the gavel falls. I stared at the ceiling of my cramped rental, the faded popcorn texture taunting me with its fragility. Shane had turned our company into a criminal enterprise, trading on my name and reputation like counterfeit currency. I grabbed my phone. Monica set up a meeting with my lawyer. "We need to file charges first thing tomorrow." Her voice snapped with urgency. "I'm on it." That evening, I met Alyssa at the small coffee shop we used to frequent before everything fell apart, before her brother wrapped our lives in his lies. The place was almost empty, amber light spilling over worn leather booths. I told her about the audit, the forged approvals, the dead man's identity used as bait. Her eyes filled with tears, but her voice remained steady. "This is criminal, Jared. We have to go all the way." I nodded. "I'm calling the FBI tomorrow. And the Wisconsin Fraud Bureau." I paused, swallowing the lump in my throat. I don't want Micah to grow up thinking his dad is anything less than honest. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "He'll understand," she said. "He'll see you did everything you could to protect him." The next morning arrived with a brittle chill in the air, the first hints of autumn curling at the edges of the lake. I drove to my lawyer's office, clasping the audit report and Monica's affidavits in a tremulous grip. The receptionist greeted me with a polite nod, and I sat in the waiting area, heart pounding so fiercely I could feel it in my fingertips. When I entered the conference room, the sterile white walls and mahogany table felt less intimidating than the binders of evidence we laid before the attorneys. Purchase orders stamped with forged signatures, wire transfers to shell companies. The death certificate of Harold Simmons beside a copy of the falsified authorization. Each page was a testament to Shane's greed and my own misjudgment in trusting him. My lawyer, Rebecca, reviewed everything with the thoughtful frown that had earned her my absolute trust. "This is airtight," she said finally. "We'll file criminal referrals, and I'll draft the civil suit to reclaim the funds and your reputation. And once the FBI sees this identity theft, they'll move fast." Relief flooded me, but behind it lurked apprehension. Shane's downfall meant more headlines, more courtroom battles, more ways for my son to hear rumors I'd rather he never knew. I signed the necessary forms, each autograph a declaration of war on the man who'd masqueraded as family while wielding deceit like a blade. As I stood to leave, Rebecca placed her hand on my shoulder. "You're doing the right thing for the company and your family." I nodded, steeling myself. It's what my father would have done. Back in my car, I allowed myself a moment of vulnerability. I closed my eyes and pictured Micah's uncertain face, then his tentative trust when I'd promised to set things right. I fingered the silver bracelet on my wrist, his Father's Day gift, and whispered, "I'll fix this, son." The engine purred to life, and I drove toward the rental by the lake, the road ahead illuminated by my determination to clear my name and protect the future I'd built. I sat in the stiff-backed chair of the law office conference room, my shoulders squared as if they carried the weight of every misstep I'd ever made. Across the polished oak table, Alyssa watched me with steady eyes. Eyes that had once been filled with doubt, but now reflected unwavering determination. The late afternoon sun filtered through blinds, casting striped shadows across the table strewn with evidence. I took a breath, opened the file in front of me, and began. "I called this meeting so there are no more lies," I said, voice low but firm. My hands hovered over the documents. Email chains between Shane and Erica, Monica's forensic audit of vendor invoices, the death certificate of Harold Simmons beside the forged approval form. "Everything you're about to see is the truth." Alyssa inhaled sharply, and I sensed the moment she realized just how deep Shane's deception ran. I flipped to the first exhibit, a transcript of a voicemail Shane had recorded on our company phone, in which he bragged about shifting funds to shell accounts and disguising the charges under my credentials. The audio file was accompanied by a spectrogram printout that traced the metadata to his personal device. I watched Alyssa's knuckles whiten as she gripped the edge of the table. Next, I presented Erica's signed affidavit. Her handwriting was neat, her admission precise, that she'd shredded original documents at Shane's request, backdated change orders, and concealed missing equipment orders. I paused, letting the silence fill the room before I spoke again. He manipulated her loyalty, just as he manipulated mine. I turned the pages to the internal audit that Monica had uncovered. $180,000 unaccounted for, traced to fictitious purchases and phantom subcontractors. It included scanned copies of canceled checks, wire transfer receipts, and interviews with site supervisors who attested they'd never received the equipment Shane claimed to order. As I spoke, I recounted each piece of evidence, naming witnesses, dates, and amounts with surgical precision. Alyssa's eyes darted between the binders and me, processing the avalanche of proof. I could almost see the old cracks in her trust begin to heal. She reached forward, smoothing the corner of a printed spreadsheet. "I had no idea," she whispered. "He built a house of cards, and I stood inside it." "I know," I replied, leaning forward. "He exploited our faith in him. But this ends now." I closed the binder and opened another folder, the official notice filed with the Secretary of State, reserving my 49% shareholder rights, along with the resolution to remove Shane as an officer. I slid the documents across the table. With this, we take back control. Her lips pressed into a thin line. He'll fight it. The tremor in her voice revealed her fear. I nodded, expecting the resistance. He will, but we have every right. And when the board sees the evidence, there's no case he can make. I then handed her the civil complaint drafted by our lawyer. Counts of breach of fiduciary duty, fraud, identity theft, and conversion of corporate assets. Each count was buttressed by exhibits, contracts, invoices, audit logs, and the testimony of Erica and Paul Harrison. I watched as she read the language, legal but unambiguous. Once we file this in district court, I said, we recover the missing funds, my reputation, and send a clear message. You don't betray this family or this company with impunity. I saw tears glisten in her eyes, tears born of relief and remorse. Alyssa closed the folder and looked up at me. Thank you for showing me the truth, she said, voice thick. I was blind. I reached out to take her hand. We're in this together, Alyssa. Always. That evening, I left the conference room with my lawyer and Monica, carrying the final drafts of the complaint and shareholder resolution. Outside, the sky was deep indigo, the first stars blinking into existence over Barrow Falls. The air was brisk, carrying the promise of change. I turned to Monica, who offered me a tired but triumphant smile. We did it, she said. Not yet, I replied quietly, but we're closer than ever. On the drive home, I thought of Micah, wondering how to explain the battle I was waging on his behalf. I parked outside my rental and stepped onto the porch, the wood creaking under my boots. Inside, I found Alyssa waiting, her arms folded but her posture relaxed. She handed me a mug of hot tea. He'll get his chance to respond, she said. But we know the truth. I wrapped my hands around the mug, the warmth seeping into my skin. Tomorrow, we file, I said. And after that, nothing he does will hide what he's done. She nodded, and for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt the tide turning irreversibly in my favor. I stood on the porch with her as the moon climbed higher, the gentle lapping of the lake in the distance like applause for silent victories. The topography of my life had shifted, trust had been betrayed, but justice was imminent. I felt the solid strength of every brick I'd laid, every promise I'd kept, and knew that this one meeting, this refusal to accept lies, had set the course for the company, my family, and the man I vowed to be. One whose grit and heart would endure far beyond any storm. The morning the feds arrived, I awoke before dawn to the steady drizzle of rain on the lakeside rental's metal roof. The patter was a reminder that storms come quietly at first, like lies, before they break with thunder. I dressed quickly in jeans and a flannel shirt, then glanced at the table where I'd laid out the final dossier, affidavits from Monica, Erica, and Paul, the filed civil complaint, the shareholder resolution, and the criminal referrals to the FBI and Wisconsin Fraud Bureau. The papers felt heavy under my fingers, like the weight of every promise I'd made, to my employees, to my clients, and to Micah. Alyssa was already in the kitchen, pouring coffee into two mismatched mugs. I inhaled the rich aroma as she handed me a cup without looking up, the steam curling between us like smoke from a battlefield. They'll be here soon, she said softly. Her voice was calm, but I saw the tension coiled behind her eyes. I nodded, draining my mug. Let's get to the office, I replied, steeling myself for the day ahead. When we arrived at the downtown headquarters, the sky had turned iron gray, raindrops rolling down the windshield like tears. I parked under the porte-cochere and stepped into the lobby, where the receptionist regarded me with surprise. They're here, I said simply, nodding toward the two men in dark suits quietly talking to a security guard at the entrance. Their badges glinted under the fluorescent lights. Let them in. The guard stepped aside without a word, and I led the way down the hallway. My footsteps echoed against the polished floors as I passed the empty workstations. Cubicles that just days ago had held Shane's smug presence, now emptied of his arrogance. The corridor opened into the boardroom, where dozens of employees had gathered silently behind the glass walls to watch. Their faces were a mixture of disbelief, relief, and hope. I caught Monica's eye. She offered a small nod that steeled my resolve. Inside, the feds, 2 agents and a Wisconsin Fraud Bureau investigator, stood beside the board table. They were professional and quiet, observing the binders stacked atop the mahogany like vultures sizing up a carcass. Board members and department heads sat uneasily, whispering among themselves. At the head of the table, Shane sat, handcuffed, his shoulders slumped, but still wearing his signature smug expression, as though this too was an illusion that would slip away. Agent Thompson cleared his throat, drawing everyone's attention. "Good morning," he began, voice smooth but authoritative. "This is a federal investigation into alleged wire fraud, identity theft, and embezzlement. We have warrants to search company records, seize financial documents, and take anyone with pertinent information in for questioning." "Mr. Donovan," he said, nodding at Shane, "you are under arrest." Shane's smirk faltered, his eyes darting around the room for an escape that didn't exist. Two plainclothes officers stood and approached him. With a gentle but firm grip on his elbows, they guided him to his feet and clipped on the handcuffs. The click sounded like a judge's gavel, and I felt a chill at the back of my neck, part triumph, part sorrow for the man who had once been family. I watched as Erica, escorted separately, followed the agents with a resigned slump of her shoulders. Her face was pale, but her eyes met mine for a moment, as though seeking forgiveness or maybe just confirmation that her decision to tell the truth hadn't been in vain. I offered her a brief nod. "Your courage mattered." Agent Thompson then turned to me. "Mr. Wexler, we may need your assistance in reviewing records and providing testimony. We will be operating here for the next several hours." I swallowed the knot in my throat. "Of course," I said, voice steady. "Whatever you need." As the agents set to work rifling through files, digital and paper, Shane's board presentation lay forgotten on the table. Behind me, the employees whispered and exchanged glances. I stepped to the window and looked out at the rain-dappled street, feeling the weight of every eye upon me. The man who had built this company was standing unshaken at the center of the storm. By midday, the feds had bundled dozens of boxes of documents into the trunks of unmarked cars. They photographed office terminals, collected thumb drives, and interviewed key personnel. I sat through it all, my heart thudding as each piece of evidence surfaced: the forged signatures, the rerouted payments, the shell company invoices. All the sins Shane had committed in my name. During a lull, Paul Harrison strode in, dripping wet but resolute. He caught my eye and raised his eyebrows in a silent question. "Do you have what you need?" I nodded, then turned to watch as he approached some of the board members, reassuring them that the Belridge contract was secure once leadership stabilized. When he shook my hand, the grip was firm and unshakable, a validation I'd fought months to reclaim. Late in the afternoon, as the last vans pulled away and the boardroom emptied, Agent Thompson approached me. "Mr. Wexler, thank you for your cooperation," he said, extending a folder. Inside were copies of the affidavit I had filed, stamped and marked with the FBI seal. "We'll follow up with you for testimony, but we believe we have what we need to proceed." I closed the folder and exhaled, relief washing over me in waves. Outside, the rain had stopped, and the clouds were breaking, letting shafts of golden light through. I stepped out onto the building's front steps and breathed in the fresh air, tasting freedom and renewal. Employees gathered behind me, some offering nods and smiles, others clasping my hand with gratitude. Monica emerged from the lobby, umbrella in hand, and joined me on the steps. I handed her the FBI-stamped affidavit. "You did this," I said, voice thick with emotion. "Without you, none of it." She shook her head, tears in her eyes. "We did it together." 3 months later, the morning I walked back into the company as its legally reinstated CEO felt like stepping onto solid ground after a quake. The lobby was freshly painted, the reception desk manned by familiar faces, and Monica waiting to welcome me with a grin. The tension that once lurked in the air had been replaced by determination and optimism. I paused at the entrance, closed my eyes, and inhaled deeply. Behind me was the wreckage of betrayal, broken trust, stolen funds, shattered reputations. Ahead of me lay the hard work of rebuilding, re-earned loyalty, restored projects, and the promise of a future I would safeguard more fiercely than ever. As I took my first steps down the hallway, a chorus of "Welcome back, Jared," rose from my staff. I stopped and turned to face them, the weight of the last months lifting from my shoulders. I raised a hand in greeting and said, "Thank you. Let's get to work." The floor no longer caved in under me. Instead, it held steady, built on the foundation of truth, loyalty, and the relentless grit that had always defined me. Shane's plea deal arrived on a gray Thursday afternoon, sealed in an envelope stamped with the U.S. Attorney's emblem. I tore it open in my corner office, my corner once more, and let the words settle. 5 years in federal prison for embezzlement and identity fraud. Erica, 16 months, and the loss of her accounting license. The sentences were harsher than I dared hope, yet lighter than the damage he'd wrought. I leaned back in my chair, the leather cushions settling beneath me as if welcoming me home. Across the desk, Monica stood holding a framed photo of our crew at the completion of the town library. Dusty helmets, sweaty grins, and the sense of accomplishment that comes when you build something meaningful. She placed it gently between us. "We did it," she said. Her voice was soft, but the pride in her tone resonated louder than any applause. I nodded, eyes lingering on the photo. The faces were a reminder of why I fought so hard. Not for profit or reputation, but for the people who trusted me with their livelihoods. Turning to Monica, I tapped the photo. "This company wouldn't exist without them," I said. "And it certainly wouldn't have survived without you." She smiled, brushed a loose strand of hair behind her ear, and left the photo leaning against my drafting table. That evening, I walked through the nearly empty office complex, past workers putting away tools and supervisors locking cabinets. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead, but I saw only the transformation of walls once scarred by conflict now painted with fresh optimism. On the way out, I paused at the door to the boardroom, where Shane's binders had once lined the table like executioner's documents, and placed a hand on the frosted glass. I imagined the echoes of that day, his smug grin, the security officers, the binders stamped evidence. And yet, here I stood, free of that burden, unbroken. At home, I found Alyssa and Micah in the living room, building a model train set on the carpet. Micah looked up, eyes wide with excitement. "Dad, the station needs a signal light," he said, pressing a tiny LED into place. I sat beside him, lifted the miniature control box, and flipped the switch. The light blinked red and green, casting a playful glow. He grinned. "Perfect." Alyssa watched us from the doorway, the corners of her mouth soft. I rose and wrapped an arm around her shoulders. "Thank you," I said quietly, "for staying." She leaned into me. "We're still here," she replied, voice steady. "Together." That weekend, I hosted a small gathering at the shop, a humble celebration under strings of work lights and banners reading "Welcome Back." Former employees returned, handshakes turned to hugs, and laughter filled the air where silence had once reigned. Paul Harrison toasted under a makeshift canopy. To Jared, who built more than structures, he built a family. Glasses clinked, and I felt the warmth of community settle around me like a blanket. As the sun dipped behind the pine line, I slipped away to the edge of the property where the first beams of the community center rose proudly against the darkening sky. My foreman, Dave, was packing up his tools. I approached him, hands in my pockets. He looked up, paused, and nodded. "Glad you're back," he said. "I sincere." I extended my hand. He clasped it firmly. "Let's finish this," I replied. That night, I sat on the porch with a single lantern, the lake reflecting stars overhead. The fight had tested me. Betrayal had carved scars I'd carry forever. But in their place grew something stronger: resolve, gratitude, and an unwavering belief that loyalty, true loyalty, could never be faked. I closed my eyes, breathed in the crisp air, and whispered into the quiet, "I'm still here." And I was. Not just as the man who reclaimed his company, but as the husband, father, and friend whose foundation was built on sweat, trust, and the unbreakable bonds of family.